So for today's ill-formed idea, I actually wanted to present an idea which I think is fairly well-formed. It's one I've been working on for a little while. And I call it toxic charisma. And it comes from both my experience as having been part of a cult and also my experience as having been inside of a lot of organizations working with leadership teams and an observer of culture in general over the years. I'm on a new podcast, by the way. I'll put a link in below, the Unmistakable Creative with Srini Rao. And he's doing a whole series on sort of cult dynamics within the personal development space. So we talk about my cult experience, then he's having other people on, people from NXIVM and other cults on to talk as well. It's a really fascinating series of studies, and or a series of conversations. I highly recommend it. So mine sort of, our conversation hinges a lot on what I call toxic charisma. And this is charisma which is used, or the charisma which creates toxic impact on you and on other people. And a lot of us kind of know intuitively what we mean, but I want to go into it in some level of detail here with you today in just a few minutes. First thing to remember is that with toxicity, there's a whole saying that the dose makes the poison, right? That aspirin can be non-toxic almost all the time, but if you take enough of it, you're going to kill yourself. And so charisma, and the same is true of alcohol, right? That a little bit is fun and a lot can be life-threatening. So with charisma itself, I would say the dose makes the poison, but also the receiver makes the poison. So in other words, someone who is toxic for me may not be toxic for you, or you may be immune to their charisma in a certain way, and I may be highly attracted to their charisma. Or it may even be time-based, situational, that I may find one person highly toxic in one context at one point in my life, and I may be able to safely ignore them or see through their BS at another time in my life. So toxicity is kind of a personal question, and it's really defined by its impact. So I'm not trying to define toxic charisma as a thing that people do, but more a thing people do and we define it as toxic because it has a certain kind of impact on people. It causes people to give up their personal autonomy over to somebody else often. That's really, I think, the main impact that toxic charisma has on people. This idea comes, it might be well defined as something we call bounded choice. This is a phrase that comes from Janja Lalich. I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce their name exactly, who wrote a wonderful book by this name and is a cult researcher and and somebody who recovered from a cult themselves. The idea behind bounded choice is that charisma pulls us in emotionally. It earns our trust through our heart or through our emotions, not through our rationality. And then it confines our rationality into that group or that area. And so what you might see is that somebody who was a great lawyer before they got into the cult gets into the cult and becomes a great lawyer for that cult. Their choice, they have personal choice, but it's bounded inside of this frame that the cult is the most important thing, the cult is the best thing. And so unearned trust which is not earned via rationality, via like, I'm going to make a cost-benefit analysis about trusting this person, but trust that is gained through, I just feel good around this person. That's really, I think, the essence of the mechanism for how charisma works and how charisma in somebody else can work against us as humans, right? We end up buying something that we don't want because we like the salesperson, or we could end up in a cult, we could end up in an abusive relationship. This brings us actually to the types of toxic charismatics. I read an article recently which I go through in detail. I think of innovators, people like Adam Neumann, who got people to trust them when he created WeWork, working below market value. He was a kind of cult leader in a way. So some people are more like Keith Reniere of NXIVM is more a cult leader. But innovator, cult leader, it can be hard to say, exactly what we're talking about. One, I think, has more of a business thing, and one is more of a sort of spiritual or religious sort of leader. I think there are influencers, the age of social media. We have people who are essentially grifters, right? They attract a lot of attention, and then they sell a lot of stuff. And we'll talk about the monetary dynamics in just a moment. But think of someone with a huge influence on YouTube, especially. I think is a special place where we find these influencers operating. Here I am talking to you on YouTube, but hopefully I'm not a bad influencer. Hopefully I'm not an influencer at all. Domestic abuse, abusive relationships. Evan Rachel Wood describes her relationship with Marilyn Manson. That has very much cult dynamics, has very much the dynamics of someone who was excited at first and then found themselves in a abusive relationship. And then finally, we have demagogues who do this in the sort of the political world, where they speak to people's fears, they whip up people's fears. I can think of somebody, I think, very clear in the political realm who's done this recently, and then they cement political power by pointing out the other and saying, you need to be afraid of these other people, I will protect you. They speak to kind of our prejudices, and again, they pull us through emotions. They may not be charismatic in the sense that they're wildly attractive, and many people might find the demagogues unattractive, but what they are is they have an emotional draw to a certain number of people, and they're often using fear to make that happen. So I mentioned before that influencers can monetize their charisma, right? They turn clicks into money, and so the more clicks or the more attention they can draw, really can impact their bottom line, and this creates a really negative feedback loop. It's actually similar to what I talked about in terms of monetizing what did I call it? Gamified innovation last week in my ill-formed idea. But essentially, the idea here is that we want to. It can be hard to know who truly believes what they say in the influencer space, and who simply is saying things they believe will get them more clicks, right? And I've seen some big influencers people who I liked and enjoyed, seemingly kind of go down this road and sort of following the money with their influence. So I want to end very quickly by just saying, look, we need to defend against the dark arts of toxic charisma. And it's really up to us. I think we can hold people accountable politically and legally and all these sorts of ways. That's fine. But at the end of the day, I think it's up to us to make sure that we have enough self-knowledge that we can defend, because we can all be influenced by toxic charismatics. It's all possible. So understanding what you're attracted to and what's toxic for you is job one. A lot of us come from, let's say, traumatic childhoods that install these certain hooks in us. So knowing yourself is really important. And I'd add one more thing, which is have a good community of people around you, people that you trust, people that you know have your best interest at heart. And before you get involved with a new leader, a new job, someone who may seem too good to be true, ask them what they think. Ask them what they see. Maintain connection to other people. A strong community is probably one of the best things we can do, both to lead a happy life as well as to defend ourselves against people who would manipulate our emotions for their own personal gain, which is essentially what a toxic charismatic is. Anyway, love to hear what you think about this idea. By the way, I have an essay. I've written about it. I haven't found a place to publish it yet. So if you have an idea of a place that might publish it, it's a long form essay, and I'd like to get it into a good venue. That'd be wonderful. But anyway, thanks very much for your time. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.